Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Last Looks. So this is kind of a very, a decent, kind of mystery kind of film. Like, I do kind of have this mixed feeling about it, if I'm really, was this really that good? Because a lot of times, a lot of people go on and be like, yeah, this movie sucked. And I'm I thought it was decent. I liked it. There was something about it that just kind of felt like a little bit different to me as far as like detective stuff goes and whichever. Um, so within this story, kind of immediately teeing it up because I thought it was a good enough film. Good enough if people want to go on and pay the $6.99 fee to watch this movie. I think that's a decent enough price for this film, but a lot of people will go on and want the free option, of course, and I can give it to you. I can give it to you. You can go on and eventually, I'm sure, you could go to a Google Play Store and probably search the word movie apps, and you'd probably find a number of apps that probably would conveniently be able to have this film. But I could also go on and help and tell you to Google search certain apps also to just kind of make you conveniently find an app for you can in fact watch this for free. Right now, currently in this second's recording, you can Google search an app called Letter C Movies, and so it's a letter and then it's a word. So C Movies. It's an app, of course, you can go on and download and be able to see whatever you want. Free movies, brand new release shows, and so on and so forth. You could also go on and search a app called Fox HD Movies, and the logo will say Fox HD Movies, but the title will say something different. It'll say Play 1080p HD Movies. But if you I had gone on to search this app, and come to find out, I ended up finding the app pretty easily. It's a kind of Black Fox HD Movies whatever app, and it's convenient. You can also go on. I know there was an app called TV Crush that I used to use, but weirdly today, out of all days, it has drastically changed the way it looks, and it just says HD movies now with this HD crown, like a king crown on the logo. So I'm like, what the is this now? I'm just man, I used to have an easy thing to just toss over to people. But now, okay, I guess that's ruined. That. Just, God, if I could just find a convenient app to just give to people, I would. But these apps just go and get more and more inconvenient every single time I'm just trying to, hand something over to people. And so we go on, and so this is a good film. A lot of people might feel differently, but I don't care. Really, I like this movie. So what is it about? So we of course have a detective named Waldo. His first name is Charlie, but I never hear that in this film. So Waldo is to be going from seclusion, basically so much so that he is to just kind of take his clothes and consistently create his own makeshift washer and dryer kind of thing, for him to just consistently use the same kind of clothes over and over and over every day. And I guess he's kind of been living 3 years like this, just kind of using the same kind of items over and over again, because he used to only have 100 items upon his body, or upon his trailer. So we have Charlie, of course, that goes on and is to have been a former detective that has kind of been pushed away from the force because of his last case that had went sour. So all of a sudden we have a case that is kind of pushed for Waldo to solve, and Waldo has like at first he's like, I have no interest in doing this case, but the further and further that it seems that he gets really just pushed into this case, where he's like, you know what, there's something about this case. Like I don't know, I'll just do it. Like let's just see what happens. So Waldo goes and is to find out that there is to be this actor who is to be performing as this judge. And like we have, of course, like Mel Gibson is this kind of chameleon-esque like actor that can go on and just have like a number of things that he can eventually do at some point. Like if you go on and you watch like his kind of lesser known films, you just kind of have like all these things that he can just pull from, and it's just interesting. Um, I don't know if I quite buy exactly like Mel's accents in this movie, um, but like I kind of find that this character is really interesting. But we have Alistair Alistair Pinch, who of course is to be convicted of his wife's murder. And we have to figure out whether or not this guy did it or didn't do it, or who would be the other culprit if, of course, Pinch didn't do it. So we kind of have to figure out that story and kind of figure out how exactly who is the one, who is the culprit. It seems to me like when I was kind of going through this story, I kind of immediately had certain feelings about certain characters, which technically led exactly to where I was like, oh, okay, so there is connections with these people, but like it didn't exactly lead me uh, to eventually figure out easily who the culprit is of this film, or culprits, or maybe it's a group of people, maybe 30 different people all killed this woman. Not quite sure. So, anyways, so with that said, it's an interesting movie. I thought it was good enough. Even though there is some points like once we get about like roughly around like the after the first hour of this film once we get like past an hour just really just slows down, and there's these kind of like random characters added that's just kind of this like run around thing and whatever. And yeah, like I don't like how we get to the final the final culprit of all this, like how we get there. But like it has some interesting bits and pieces of it. Um, and those interesting bits, like, there is a lot of runaround, I'll admit that. There is a lot of runaround, but it's an interesting amount of runaround. Like, there's a decent amount of interesting things out of this. So, yeah. So, I think that's all that I want to say about this very cryptic like sense. Let's just get into spoilers. Let's go out of our way to say that it's about that time to go into spoilers about this one. Yeah. So let me know in the comments below if you went on to see this movie. Maybe you liked it, maybe you hated it, maybe you're like, man, it was a decent film. Um, Let me know in the comments below if you're gonna go out of your way to see the last looks, whatever. Anyway, already seen it, so I'm not gonna see it again. But anyways, let's go into that double five time territory. Let's just go into these things called spoilers, because it is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we get to spoil this movie. So, Charlie Waldo. Waldo, of course, is to be in this trailer, going on and listening to this woman that's kind of like trying to like save the ecosystem and all this kind of stuff. And we kind of have Waldo, who is going on and is to have a life where he is to. Everything within this trailer is to is going to be able to have him live for the rest of his life. Because this guy is just perfectly... He has his trailer where he bought this one stretch of land, and Waldo is to have these like chickens and like and these certain kind of things that are just to kind of keep him going for the rest of his days if he just decides to just continue to go on and living this lifestyle. Waldo has gone on and left doing police work for 3 years and is to just kind of have lived, of course, out in the wilderness, in the boonies or whatever, so to speak. And Charlie every day is to go on and just to meditate and just have some good time. So all of a sudden, we have Lorena, who comes to meet with Waldo, and Lorena just wants to kind of see how Waldo is doing, because she, of course, has not heard a word from him, and it's like, well, Waldo hasn't really gone on to hear or try to reach out to anybody. So Lorena is kind of finding out that Waldo has a collection of 100 things, and that's all he's ever going to have. And so whenever he goes on and loses one of those 100 things, he is to go and find a new item to add to his collection of 100 things. Which I thought was kind of goofy. I was thinking, what is he gonna, like, all together lose all 100 of those things? And then, like, he'll have nothing, he'll just have to start over? But we have Lorena, who's trying to, like, reminding Waldo of the good times that they had. Because we find out that both Lorena and Waldo have had a past, like, relationship, technically, where Lorena is to mention about both her and Waldo, who had this this kind of, I'm assuming, makeout sesh, or maybe more, by this elephant sculpture. It was a mammoth sculpture. And Waldo was to go on and bring Lorena to this same spot where there was to be another elephant sculpture. And Lorena's like, well, hey, like, is this some kind of message you're sending me, Waldo? And Waldo's like, well, wait a minute. Like, that sculpture from before was a mammoth. This is an elephant. Two different things. So we have Waldo and Lorena talking about this case, and she really wants him to be part of this case. And Waldo has really no interest in going back into working for any kind of precinct or doing any kind of case or whatever. And Lorena is going on and talking to Waldo and saying, like, well, hey, like, that whole case that like that you did before you left, like, hey, like, that could have happened to anybody. And so that whole Dell case. So we end up finding out later when we have, of course, Waldo, who talks to Jane White, like, what had happened to that whole last case. We end up finding out that Waldo had actually convicted the wrong man, and Waldo was trying to get this this innocent man. Waldo was trying to get him released from prison, but for some odd reason, like, they couldn't go on to try to get him released in time, and this guy was to get killed in prison. And so Waldo had kind of just soured out from that whole moment, and so Waldo went on, and instead of him kind of just disappearing one day Instead, he kind of disappeared into walking in front of a microphone and telling any news or any reporter or anybody that he could find what is really going and happening with this precinct, singing like a canary. And a lot of the other police officers are rubbed the wrong way by that, and they call him a rat when Waldo is to make it back to that precinct and start asking some of the detectives that were, or some of the police officers that were at that scene of that crime, what had happened later on in the film. Because we have it to where Waldo like doesn't know. He had to go on and kind of collect some pieces to figure out like, okay, what exactly is missing here. So, anyways, let's let's backpedal. So all of a sudden, Waldo, after talking to Lorena, and Waldo is telling her, "I'm not interested in this case. Goodbye." So we have Lorena who leaves, and so all of a sudden, Waldo is kind of sleeping as if this is a normal day for him. To all of a sudden have a number of men that have come to his trailer and are of course beating him up for reasons that he doesn't quite understand. So we go on and have these two guys, of course, that are to look like rappers, because they are rappers, because we find out that they're working with uh, Swag Dog, who is actually Method Man in this movie. I think the credits actually, like, they say, of course, Cliff Smith, which is Method Man's actual name. It's kind of funny because Method Man, I actually saw him recently on a Screen Junkie video where he was going on and talking that he was actually a really big fan of the YouTube channel Screen Junkie. And so, yeah, I conveniently watched that video because I'm like, yeah, I'm big. Like, I enjoyed the kind of the hidden gem kind of movies that was in Screen Junkie. I think they call them like, hey, movies that you've never heard of, like, and like so. Eventually, I'm like, ooh, this movie looks interesting, but probably heavily inconvenient for anybody to frickin' find. That's the thing that sucks. It's like, yeah, go on and like talk about a film that is just not easy to find anywhere for anybody. You'd really have to go and dig, or just go and like have somebody like, hey, if you want to buy this movie on Amazon somewhere so you can see it, and like you're not sure about it and whatever, but like I mean like buy it, like the DVD and Blu-ray case, because heaven forbid you actually can find this movie even on Amazon to rent or buy or whatever. But again, that's just the roll of the dice that you go on to when you try to go on and try to do these reviews and whatever. Plus, there's fun movies that like people should know about, but anyways, so. 'Cause I like to do a lot of fun movies, even if it's a rare film. So we have it where Waldo is talking to these rappers, and so all of a sudden he's finding out that he is involved in this case, and through a newspaper, and he's like, "What the fuck? Like, I'm not involved in this case." So all of a sudden we now have it where Waldo is, of course, trying to seek out, like, okay, like Lorena, like I'm not getting her, like what the heck? I'm not involved in this case. So, and we also had Big Jim Cuppy, who a lot of people will have seen Clancy Brown recently in like Dexter New Blood, or has recently kind of seen him in any number of things, like Highlander, or the first one, or possibly like the Shawshank Redemption is the kind of the main officer. or Detroit Become Human. You'd probably see him in there. But yeah, so Big Jim Cuppy was also going on and asking Waldo about this case, and he kind of wants this case. And Waldo's like, dude, I have no interest in doing this case. Like, stop pestering me. All you people are just pestering me about this case. So it leads Waldo to go back to this, of course, precinct to just kind of talk to Lorena, and Waldo goes on and is to find out that Lorena is dead, and that I guess she was to be a crispy critter, of course, in this car, and somebody had roasted her in this car. And Wallo's like, okay, this is weird. She's dead now? Like, I loved her and she's dead. How could this have happened? But the first thing that Waldo was to do before hearing about Lorena, he goes on to make it to this network that he is to have been told that he's tied to with this case. And so he goes on and is to, Waldo is to speak to a guy named Wilson Sikorsky, and we have this guy who is to be this kind of agent, kind of guy who's to be tied to Pinch. And so this guy, it's like, well, hey, like, Wilson is to know everything that Pinch does, and really, Wilson is kind of relying on Pinch to just kind of save this show that he's on, as we find out that Pinch is to be some kind of judge that, of course, is giving this final verdict upon this story. So, because of course he's an actor that goes on and does like a number of different like spots and stories and whatever. So we have Wilson who's writing on like Pinch just kind of being dissolved to this case, and so we have Waldo that's just kind of like, okay, well, how much you paying me? It's like 1,000. It's like, well, you're gonna have to make it 2,000 because I'll do this case, but I want whatever money that I get from this case to be like donated, because Waldo doesn't need money anyways. He's gone on to just like kind of perfect that he like is to finally live a life without needing anything. I'm like, man, just wait till something breaks down and then you're just scrambling to just like, oh my god, maybe I should have taken that money. But anyways, so Waldo goes and is to go on and take this case, especially after he spends the day with Pinch, and starts to talk to him and starts to see him with his daughter, and how also Waldo is to meet up with Jane White, who is to be Pinch's daughter's teacher. And Waldo starts talking to Jane White, and is like, well, hey, like, how much do you know about Pinch's wife? So we of course have Jay White that really is to not really say that Pinch's wife was really all that interested in what their daughter was really doing, and that Jane wasn't exactly surprised when Pinch or when Pinch's wife was to be killed. And Waldo's like, what do you mean by that? Kind of seems like Jane is just kind of skirting around things. And so while class is to be back in session, we have Waldo going and talking to Jane and saying like, well, I think I'm gonna need to talk to you later. And so Jane is just like, well, okay, like meet me at this bar. So we have Pinch that's going on and talking to Waldo. And he's like, well, hey, are you gonna take this case, or like, are you still unsure? Like, are you gonna just? So we have Waldo that's like, okay, I'll take this case. Like, sure. Like, so we have Waldo going and talking to Jane about the case that he had gone on to do last, and so it seems that both Jane and Waldo are just to try to get both drunk, and then Jane is being interested in wanting to just get with Waldo one way or the other. So at some point, we have Jane who is to kind of shave up and clean up Waldo from his Grizzly Adams looking beard, which isn't all that grizzly and all that Adamsy, but it is what it is with the story. So Jane goes and is to shave this man, and is to go on and sleep with this man. And so we have it where Waldo is just kind of like, he's very rusty because he can't read people. To where, like, it feels that Waldo is possibly thinking, like, somehow or another that Jane might be attached to this case. In the back of my mind, I'm also thinking the same thing too. I'm like, there has to be something going on with Jane White, because she's skirting around things far too much, and her kind of saying that she wasn't surprised that Pinch's wife had died immediately just meant that she had some connection with it. But, like, so going further into this story, we are to find out that there is to be these two other men that are going on and are being at Waldo's trailer. And they're going on, and we have this one guy who is Don Q, and he is, of course, with this boxer. And so Don Q goes on and is to eventually, like, hey, you have this Kindle, right? Because Waldo had to make all this journey to make it all the way back to his trailer just to basically get beaten up for no good reason, because Waldo had picked up this phone for Don Q and said, hey, I know who the person is that had killed Pinch's wife, and you have to go to the back to your trailer to figure it all out, and I'll tell you everything. Waldo goes all the way back there just to be misled and just to get beaten up. So, uh, so we go on, and that's, I think, when Don Q is to reveal, of course, that Lorena is dead to Waldo, and that he's also getting, like, punched out by this boxer. So we have Waldo that goes and scrambles to this precinct to talk to this detective who's called Annis, and we'll find out that he has a nickname. So Waldo is trying desperately to go on and talk to Annis and find out certain things about the kind of murder room that was kind of looked over by certain detectives. Because we had Waldo who is to kind of have this magazine, weirdly, of this exact same room that Waldo was in by the time of the murder. And so Waldo goes on and is to talk to Pinch, and, like, we had this really cool, like, magazine move where we go on and we have uh like Waldo who like lifts up this magazine and he's kind of like looking to like, okay, what's missing? And then he lifts it back up and then puts it down again, and all of a sudden it's like Mel Gibson right there, but like, huh, hey, what's going on? So all of a sudden Waldo is talking to Pinch and kind of mentioning that there's certain items that are missing. That I guess there is some award that had gone missing, and that there is a vase or a vase that had gone missing, and there's also a table that had gone missing. And so Pinch goes on and he's like, well, hey, like my wife is a decorator. So, like, at some points in time, like, yeah, she would go on and move a number of things. Uh, but the vase was actually the item that went on to kill this woman, supposedly. And so we, of course, have it where Waldo is asking about the award. And Pinch is mentioning that that award was some kind of small, insignificant award that Pinch had got, I guess, along with his like a People's Choice Award kind of things. But Pinch, I guess, like his wife, out of jealousy, was to always show so highly and so prominently Pinch's least significant award, to just kind of consistently rub it in his face, I guess, to try to either humbleize him or just to like, haha, and yeah, you got this silly little award too. So Pinch knew nothing about the table, and so Waldo was to go on and he was to find this table kind of later on in his room, and weirdly the table is kind of faced a different way. And so Waldo goes and finds this kind of little drawer in this table to find this burner cell phone that is to lead to this one number. That, of course, to lead him to this one man. So while Waldo is talking to Annis and talking about the case and talking about the vase and talking about how Pinch could not have possibly killed this woman because he was right-handed and the murderer had to be left-handed, and it's the only thing that really makes sense. We then go on and are to have Waldo as he's leaving the precinct, because we of course have this uh, Lieutenant Pete Conady, Canady, Conady. Good grief! The guy, of course, who's to be kind of telling everybody to be quiet, don't tell him anything. Like, he doesn't really work with us. He's just some rat. Like, don't tell him anything that's gonna help him on his case. Yada yada yada. So we we have it where Waldo is to walk out of this precinct, all of a sudden bumping into this Warren Gomes, who is to be some lawyer. And so Warren Gomes is mentioning that he is to have this bike that is technically attached to Waldo's bike. And so Warren is like, well, hey, I'm going to get this like little lock that's attached to your bike, because we find out that Waldo is trying to detach his bike from this little cage, but he's like locked in because somebody had decided to attach their lock to his bike, so he can't get his bike out. So Warren is talking to Waldo here, and we have Waldo that's like, hey, like, why are you following me? Like, it's obvious that you have been following me all this day. Like, why are you following me? And we go on and we have this guy who's kind of this like ambulance chaser kind of guy, and he's kind of one of these like, hey man, like, uh, don't you throw a punch or don't you try to hurt me or I'll sue you for damages. And so we find out that Warren is to have the exact same watch as, of course, Wilson did. Because Wilson is going on and talking about this one of a kind watch that there's only like 35 that kind of make it out for 1 year of time. So we have Waldo who's spotting this watch in this man. So it's like, interesting. So Waldo goes on and is to eventually find out that Pinch is to be much more connected to Jane White than we thought. Because Pinch at one point was to go on and confess to Waldo that he was having an affair with Jay White, and Pinch found out that Jay White was pregnant. And of course, we have it where Waldo was saying, it's like, well, like, how do you not know any number of these things, like, could happen? And we are to have it where, of course, Pinch is to be this notorious drunk that is to have gotten married and had gotten any number of things of life, gotten like his like the birth of his child and all these kind of these big lavish activities, of course, that are to be like big milestones of his life. All of those things, like he never remembered them the next day. Like he completely like blacked out about it or blanked out. So we now have it where Waldo's like, like, so there's a reason why maybe Jane was trying to seduce me to maybe cloud my judgment. And so we also find out that Waldo is on this bus and listening to this guy who's having these two rappers kind of play this song on this phone somewhere. And Waldo's asking this guy, it's like, well, hey, who are these rappers? And they are connected with Swag Dog, who is to be kind of Method Man's character. We end up finding out that Method Man's character, Swag Dog, is to be involved in this class. I'm like, so yeah, there has to be a connection with this teacher somehow. But we really just find out the only real connection here is that Jane White was to be pregnant with Pinch's, with of course Pinch's child, and that's about it. So it's like, oh, okay, all right. So after we have Waldo, who is kind of being chased around by Warren, we go on and we have Waldo, who is to pickpocket Warren to get his cell phone to go on and find out that his last call was to be from a Darius Jimshidi. And so Warren goes on, or Waldo, not Warren, Waldo goes on to track down this Darius character to ask him some questions. Let me pause here for 1 second. Alright. So we have Waldo go all the way to track down Darius. To really, like, right around this point, I'm like, man, have they just gone through just a ton of people? And at this point, I'm just like, man, either Darius has to be the killer, or I don't care. Because at this point, like we've kind of run through a number of people that are all feel like meaningless people, and it feels like Darius is just adding putting a cherry on top of just meaningless people at this point. And because I think the whole Warren situation, like, why was that guy there? It's just kind of like adding a person so he can, like, ooh, I could say I worked with this guy, or that this guy had gotten a job, or whatever. Like, they just wanted to figure out some way to have this guy be used somewhere in this film. And they were coming up with something possibly on the fly. Who knows? So, we had us have, of course, Waldo going on a meeting with Darius to have Waldo interrupt this kind of this fundraising thing going towards charity, and we of course have Darius's wife who's all just distraught by Waldo going in and beating up these security guards and kind of cuffing them and so on and so forth. So Waldo is talking to Darius, and like the conversation between these two just kind of lead to nothing that I hold very high in real importance. And so by this point I'm just like, let's get who to the killer. Like, let's kind of wrap this bad boy up. And we're like almost, we still have about like roughly 30 minutes left. So by the time we talk to Darius, and all this is to really get resolved at this point. So there's nobody really left on the table but us going back to Don Q to go and have him being questioned about killing uh, Lorena. And so Don Q is to tell Waldo the truth that Don Q was having Lorena like work for him and doing like some security stuff, and because he was kind of suspicious on some people, and she had to go on and supposedly fake her death, and so Lorena is still technically alive because she was doing, I guess, some undercover work. And so we had it where Waldo was to get uh, this kind of little USB port thing of information that, of course, had some password, and we had Waldo not quite figure what the heck that was. But we end up finding out what that actually was is just some waste of time, like, poem thing that Don Q was to go on and talk about in the later part of this film. So now that Lorena is technically alive and Waldo is calling her on the phone, kind of confirming that she's still alive. So now we have Waldo that is to solve this case. So Waldo is to, of course, go on to Wilson and say, he's like, you know what, I think I figured this all out. I think I've put all the pieces together. And I'm going to say that Jane White could have done something here. And so we go on and we have Waldo, who is to grab this signed football that these guys are just throwing back and forth. And so the more and more we have Waldo starting to talk to Wilson here, of course, this being Pinch's technical agent here, and just kind of pulling at some threads here, going on and having Waldo realize that it's like, well, hey, you said that if you, like, you always are very much in need to know about anything that basically Pinch is doing, correct? And so, uh, and so Wilson, you immediately knew that Pinch was having an affair with his wife, right? And So I'm sure also Wilson knew because Pinch was mentioning that Pinch's wife wanted Pinch to just kind of leave to go back, uh, like go back home, I guess, uh, to overseas instead of like staying with this show. And so, and Wilson, I'm assuming, knew about all that also. And so, Waldo was also mentioning that the same watch that Warren had was the exact same watch that Wilson had because he could tell because it's a unique, one of a kind looking watch. And Wilson is just like, well, yeah, like I have a new watch on right now, or I have a watch that's similar but not the same kind of thing. So we then have Waldo make the conclusion that Wilson was actually the real culprit here to try and kill Pinch's wife instead of Jane White. Because Waldo was going on and saying that Jane may be the killer, but it wasn't to be cementingly true that she was actually the killer because he knew all along that it was actually Wilson. As the more pieces fell together, that we of course have a cell phone, a burner cell phone that was to lead back, I guess, to Wilson for all the people that he, I guess, had worked with, and so that was the kind of the important thing of that whole cell phone. So, so we go on here and we had it where Wilson was to hide that table and was to go and take that award and kill Pinch's wife with it, and was to hide it in some dumpster randomly somewhere in cities or whatever. And so we go on, and all that Waldo needed to confirm was that Wilson was left-handed, and Waldo tosses this football to have, of course, Wilson catch it with his left hand. It's like, aha. So we then go on and have both Wilson and Waldo that is making it through to this one court set piece to now have Wilson finally try to attack Waldo and is trying to uh, kill him with this light, this set light. Uh, Wilson is trying to kill Waldo. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, we have Don Q, that I guess was to have his suspicions that something's going to go horribly awry with Waldo. And so Don Q followed Waldo around by just kind of posing as some tourist person that was going on some tour through the studio. And so Don Q used Waldo's gun to shoot this man and kill him before Wilson was to be able to kill Waldo here. And so we go on, and of course, because we tried to have Wilson, who was bringing in and cuffing Wilson to be having these two police officers go and arrest Wilson, but we end up finding out that those guys are not real cops, they're just extras. And so Wilson goes and takes his police car and starts driving off, which leads, of course, Waldo to have to try and, I guess, kill Wilson and then try and get someone to come and arrest or just kind of clean up the mess of Wilson and kind of have this be an open and shut case that Wilson, of course, was to do this, which was to leave, of course, Pinch, who is to now be kind of relieved of all this. And so now Pinch is deciding that he's never going to touch a thing of alcohol again, that he's going to go straight from now on, and but he's going to, I guess, drink a certain kind of water that may kind of look like he's drinking alcohol. So it's like, hey, like, so that way, like, these guys, like, uh, don't think that I'm like sobering up. That I can go on and kind of still joke around and whatever and get away with a number of things because everyone will still think that I'm drunk. So after we have Waldo that is very relieved about this whole case, because of course he's very clean shaven, as we have Pinch's daughter who's like, oh my god, what happened to your mane? Because she called him a lion. And we of course had Waldo who says like, yeah, Princess was to take it away from me. So we go on and we have Lorenzo or Lorena who meets up with Waldo again, and is like, hey, you finally cleaned up. So we both have these characters that at the end of this we have them kind of we have them kiss here, and I want to figure out if I'm saying this girl's name right. The girl, of course, who is to be right here, of course, is Lorena. If I keep saying that wrong, my apologies. But if anything, you'll probably figure out when you're watching the movie. Because I know I eventually mix up some names somewhere. But yeah, so they both kiss, and really it's just kind of a run off in the sunset kind of thing, where you have the guy who solved the case, and so really that's all that happens the rest of this film, is to just have these two kiss, and the movie ends. So yeah, so that's it for Last Looks. Let me know in the comments below if you watch this movie and you're like, yeah, or maybe you're like, I thought this was good enough. Maybe some people might have liked this movie or enjoyed it or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's my time to say I'm going to get out here so I can put this and upload this up for the day so I can go on to get some rest and then head for the, the next day and do another video and another movie and another show or another or something. So, bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.